Hello everyone, in this video we'll study ICD-10-CM General Coding Guidelines Part 2. In the previous video I have discussed Part 1. So to learn more about ICD-10-CM you can check my playlist CPC Exam ICD-10-CM series. Let's start. First is level of detail in coding. Diagnosis codes are to be used and reported at their highest number of characters available and to the highest level of specificity documented in the medical record. It means that we have to code to the highest degree of specificity. So a 3-digit code may be used only when the category is not subdivided further. When a 3-digit code has subdivisions, the appropriate subdivision must be coded. A code is invalid if it has not been coded to the full number of characters required for that code, including the 7th character if applicable. So the meaning of this guideline is diagnosis codes must be reported at their highest number of characters available. The appropriate codes from A00.0 through T88.9, Z00 to Z99.8 and U00 to U85 must be used to identify diagnosis, symptoms, conditions, problems, complaints or other reasons for the encounter or visit. Next is multiple coding for a single condition. In addition to etiology manifestation convention that requires 2 codes to fully describe a single condition that affects multiple body systems, there are single conditions that also require more than 1 code. So we have to use additional code. So use additional code note will be available in the tabular list for codes that are not part of an etiology manifestation pair when a secondary code is useful to fully describe a condition. So whenever you see use additional code note, it indicates that secondary code should also be added. Next is combination code. A combination code is a single code used to classify 2 diagnoses, a diagnosis with associated secondary process or a diagnosis with an associated complication. So combination codes are identified by referring to subterm entries in the alphabetic index and by reading the inclusion and exclusion notes in the tabular list. So we have to assign a combination code only when that code fully identifies the diagnostic conditions involved. Next is sequela, that is late effects. So what is sequela? A sequela is a residual effect. Okay, after the acute phase of an illness or injury has been terminated. So usually late effect is inactive residual effect or condition produced after the acute portion of an injury has passed. This guideline is very important. There is no time limit on when a sequela code can be used. The residual may be apparent early, such as in cerebral infarction, or it may occur months or years later, such as that due to previous injury. So examples of sequela include scar formation resulting from a burn, deviated septum due to nasal fracture, and infertility due to tubal occlusion from old tuberculosis. Therefore, coding of sequela requires 2 codes sequenced in the following order. That is, the condition or nature of the sequela will be sequenced first and the sequela code is sequenced second. So first we have to code the condition or nature of the sequela and second we have to use the sequela code. Next is use of sign, symptom and unspecified codes. Here they have mentioned each healthcare encounter should be coded to the level of certainty known for that encounter. The rule is do not code a diagnosis unless it is certain. Examples of language seen in medical record that identify uncertain diagnosis include probable, suspected, questionable, working, differential and rule out. So all these are uncertain diagnosis. So we should not code uncertain diagnosis. When a definitive diagnosis has not been determined, we have to code the sign, symptom and abnormal test results or other reasons for the visit. For example, fatigue, suspect iron deficiency, anemia. So in this case, it is only necessary to code fatigue because the physician has not confirmed a diagnosis for iron deficiency, anemia. They have mentioned the word suspect. So it is an uncertain diagnosis. So we should not code iron deficiency, anemia. We have to code only for fatigue. Next is impending or threatened condition. Code any condition described at the time of discharge as impending or threatened as follows. So if it did occur, we have to code the confirmed diagnosis. If it did not occur, then we have to refer the alphabetic index to determine if the condition has a sub-entry term for impending or threatened. And also we have to refer main term entries for impending and for threatened. So if the sub-terms are listed, we have to assign the given code. If the sub-terms are not listed, code the existing underlying condition and not the condition described as impending or threatened. Next important guideline is acute and chronic conditions. So what is acute condition and what is chronic condition? Acute conditions are sudden and severe, and chronic condition develops slowly over a long period of time. Let us see the guideline. If the same condition is described as both acute and chronic and separate sub-entries exist in the alphabetic index, code both sequencing the acute code first. So it means that when an acute and chronic condition is documented and there is a separate code for each, we have to code both. But the rule is that acute code should be sequenced first. Next guideline is each unique ICD diagnosis code may be reported only once for an encounter. It means that do not report same diagnosis code more than once. This applies to bilateral conditions. That is, there will be instances when a provider will document a bilateral condition or two different conditions that are reported with the same diagnosis code. When either situation occurs, we have to only report the unique ICD code once. Next is laterality. Some ICD codes indicate laterality, specifying whether the condition occur on the left, right, or is bilateral. If no bilateral code is provided and the condition is bilateral, we have to assign separate codes for both left and right sides. That is when the ICD codes specify whether the condition occur on left or right side. If the side is not identified in the medical record, we have to assign a code for unspecified side. Next is borderline diagnosis. If the provider documents a borderline diagnosis at the time of discharge, the diagnosis is coded as confirmed unless the classification provides a specific entry. For example, borderline diabetes. If a borderline condition has specific index entry in the ICD, it should be coded as such.